Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. You see this? Hopefully you see this. It's on the outside of my shirt now, so hopefully no comments about that. Today we're going to be talking about something that I think is really important. When talking about transit, people let nostalgia color their opinions a bit too much in my opinion. No, streetcars operating in mixed traffic aren't good, old-fashioned looking trains aren't fine, and trolleybuses are just not a great solution for every bus route. In this video, I'm going to be addressing that third point, why trolleys are far oversold, or at least why people think they're far better than they really are. When I'm referring to trolleys, I'm referring to trolleybuses specifically. Let's get into it. To be clear, trolleybuses are cool. My hometown of Vancouver has one of the last remaining systems in North America, and riding them is really quite enjoyable. They're quick, and the kind of relaxing hum of the electric motor is super satisfying. When I was a kid, I couldn't really understand why we didn't have a far bigger trolley system and why we weren't extending it into all the suburbs. I would learn. The first problem, and this is pretty specific to North America, is that trolleys just aren't all that common. Now, again, in Eastern Europe and Asia and other parts of the world, this isn't the case. But in North America, there's only a handful of trolley systems left, and what that means is there's a limited supply of compliant buses that are available, and they're usually not always in production. What this means is that you'll see a lot of systems on the West Coast have very similar buses, and that's because they all ordered them around the same time to kind of get sort of the benefit of having a larger production line going. The issue is that when you only have a few systems, it's harder to acquire equipment. And that's not just referring to the initial bus order, but that's also the parts. Now, to be clear, yes, this issue would be fixed if we went and installed trolley systems in every city. But I'm going to talk a bit more about why that also might not make a ton of sense. Trolleybuses have a lot of operational issues. Now, if you look at the TTC in Toronto, they're actually moving away from trolley poles on the streetcars. In no small part because there's a lot of issues with dewiring. And streetcars are on rails. The truth is, trolley buses in Vancouver, for example, have significant issues with dewiring, and that's just the nature of the technology. They also can't easily pass one another, and when you have this sort of large network that makes trolleys make more sense, well, you often have to operate slowly when traveling through switches and the like, and if your driver has a problem and they switch incorrectly, well, then you have more operational issues. Of course, trolleybuses also can't pass easily, that is, which creates another issue because being able to overtake and operate express services is more difficult, which is why, for example, on the Broadway corridor in Vancouver, the trolleys operate the local service and diesel-electric buses operate the express. All these issues mean trolleys aren't only difficult to work with when you're planning routes, but a lot of drivers aren't huge fans from the ones I've talked to in Vancouver. The biggest and perhaps the most underappreciated issue from the transit enthusiasts I've talked to is the infrastructure. Not only do you need to build it in the first place, and to be honest, if you're going to build it, you're going to want to build a lot, because having a network makes more sense than having a single line, but you also have to maintain it over years and years. Now, it's totally true that trolleybuses have a lot of cost efficiencies. They can last longer, they require less maintenance, and driving them is less expensive because electricity tends to be far cheaper than fossil fuels. But what people don't seem to recognize is that there's massive cost inefficiencies to, for example, operating a small bespoke fleet of buses, having to have people who specifically do maintenance on trolley wires and the trolley buses. And yes, to be clear, that might just mean training certain employees extra, but this just creates a lot of problems because now you have certain people who are trained to operate and maintain certain buses and not others, and those people have to be treated differently than other mechanics, and it's just a bit of a logistical headache. Now, I think what's clearly the answer is that if you need to go to zero emissions, battery buses offer a lot of benefits. Battery buses are improving massively. You have better chemistries, which allow for longer range and better longevity over the years. You have chemistries that are also more ethical. For example, chemistries which remove minerals like cobalt. There's also the fact that as a sort of ecosystem, we're moving towards more recycling and reuse options for batteries which no longer make sense for use on a vehicle, but which might make sense for static storage, for example. That's not to even get into the fact that any good battery bus system should kind of consider the batteries separately from the vehicles, which means that you should be able to swap out batteries, meaning that you don't necessarily need to fast charge all that much. And that also means that swapping in a new battery onto a vehicle which has kind of exhausted the life of its existing battery is much easier, which means that a bus that might be 7 or 8 years old can have new life breathed into it via having its battery switched out. Now, of course, hydrogen buses are also an option. They have some of the benefits of traditional buses, being able to be fueled quickly, and some of the benefits of electric buses. I do think hydrogen buses might actually make sense someday if we have a massive electricity surplus, but probably not today. It's still a technology worth developing, I think. If we're talking about a system which doesn't have existing trolley infrastructure, well, investing in more buses and better service, because you don't have to fund the installation of infrastructure and the extra cost of maintaining and operating on it, means that you can operate a better transit service, albeit without the cool trolley wires everywhere. And to be fair, a system built on battery buses is going to be more resilient than a trolley bus system. That's especially true in an energy system that moves towards renewables, which most major countries are doing. While trolley buses obviously depend on a lot of common infrastructure, the trolley wires, battery buses can be far more decentralized, and they offer a lot of other benefits in terms of that decentralization of infrastructure. Of course, to be clear, there are hybrid options. What am I talking about? Well, the idea of having in-motion charging. Essentially battery buses which have trolley poles, allowing them to charge as they drive along in a main trunk area, and then go off-wire to serve areas which aren't electrified. Now, to be clear, these systems definitely offer benefits, and in North America, Dayton, Ohio is actually working with them. The problem is these systems are not seamless yet. Rewiring is still an issue. It can be automated, but it doesn't work in motion, for example, and you need space to actually do the rewiring. Plus, you need to actually plan that into your route. To be clear, I still think this is an interesting solution, but what I think you'll see in a few decades down the line is that the true solution doesn't actually involve trolleys. If you've seen e-highways or the electric highways that have been tested in areas of Europe, you'll see that they actually use a sort of pantograph-looking system where you have two pantographs on the top of the bus, and they use sensors to follow the trolley-looking wires above the highway. The reason this system is better is because it should make rewiring a lot easier, and because it enables things like higher speeds. I'm not sure what the future holds, and I'm sure that overhead wire buses and battery electric buses will be part of it. Just don't expect a trolley operating down every street. Thanks for watching.